Let's quench our thirst for connection through sharing and learning about wine. Hey everybody, welcome back to Sip Therapy Live, or if this is your first time joining, thank you so much for joining. We're having a great time connecting virtually over wine and beyond, and that's what today, Thursday, is all about. We've got a different theme every day of the week, so I hope that you'll enjoy today's episode enough that you'll come back and see the rest tomorrow, Friday flights. In honor of my wonderful partners at Delta Airlines, we call it a flight on Friday, and this will be based on the theme of Sauvignon Blanc Day, hashtag Sauv Blanc Day, which is a big Twitter sphere and social media event. Well, lots of people will be doing lots of broadcasts about Sauvignon Blanc, so mine is going to be all about pairing Sauvignon Blanc, and we're going to have some really, really cool pairings that are easy to pull off, including one that I call a pantry pairing. So you probably have it in your pantry or your freezer or a combination. And I'm also going to be featuring a Sauvignon Blanc that is the white wine, the first white wine of a very, very famous European estate, truly iconic. And it's not in France. So you've got to tune in tomorrow to check that out. And Saturday, we always do a Saturday Cellar raid. And since Saturday is Derby-less day and we are all missing our live sports, well, it was going to, hey, it sounds like I got a little bit of, oh, okay. I thought I had a little bit of input from the background. Anyway, so Saturday Cellar raid. We're not going to have a Derby, but we can still celebrate Derby Day, which is always the first Saturday in May. So my Cellar raid is inspired by the Derby. Yes, there will be a wine, but there will also be a really, really special non-wine. You're going to have to check it out. And I'm super excited about it because I grew up part of my childhood in Louisville, Kentucky, where the Kentucky Derby is run. And so I'll also be having a hat contest. Yes, that's right. You can join. Post your hat picture on Instagram and hashtag Sip Therapy Live. Tag me. I want to see your picture of your hat. If you're like Kate Middleton and Meghan Markle and you've got a really awesome, true deal, sexy, cool Jackie Onassis hat, then by all means show it. Mine's going to be homemade. That's our family tradition. We draw the names out of the hat of the horses. We make a bourbon cocktail for the grown-ups, and we make funny hats. Mine is made. There is a theme, and I need you to see it. So I'll see you for Saturday Cellar raid. Sunday will be kitchen dates, and my husband John is going to be cooking up something really cool with maitake mushrooms. He's also going to show an amazingly great technique for cooking the mushrooms so that they're really great texture, so you have to tune in for that. Monday is always our matching day, and in honor of International Press Freedom Day, which is declared by the UN, I'm going to celebrate women of words and wine, and some great vintners, Joyce Sterling from Iron Horse and Leslie Frank from Frank Family, both of whom were journalists before, and we're actually going to pair with a recipe by a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist from the New York Times, and I think you're going to love that one. Tuesday, Newsday. This week we talked about port. We talked about how to help restaurants and how restaurants are helping their communities. And next Tuesday we'll have more news, and we always do a new wine. This last week was Gruner Veltliner, and next Tuesday, I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to have to tune in, right? So Tuesday is Newsday. That's new wines and wine news, right? Wednesday, we do wine school, so we're going to have another deep dive on tasting, this time on the nose and palate. Last time we talked about the appearance. And Thursday, you're going to love this. Next week's, we are going to focus on the Negroni. But I have created a recipe for a Negroni-esque cocktail with a lot less alcohol, a lot more refreshing, so just in time for summer. So I'm calling it the No-Groni, right? So it's the perfect name. All right, so you're going to have to tune in for that. But let's get started on today because we're getting ready for Saturday. And so we're focusing on bourbon. And bourbon, of course, is the quintessential iconic American whiskey. We're also going to explore a very historic cocktail book. I'll show you that in just a second. But first of all, Bourbon Basics, it's really, really simple. It's a type of whiskey, and it is has to be produced in the United States from a minimum of 51% of corn in the grain mash, okay? And then they typically can use rye, sometimes barley. Maker's Mark is a wheated bourbon, so they're all different ways of doing it. It then has to be aged in a brand new charred oak barrel. And there's no minimum aging, but if the bourbon is called straight whiskey, I've always wondered what that meant, like what makes it straight as opposed to crooked, right? But it has to be at least 2 years in the barrel. Saturday's Cellarade, we're gonna top that by a lot, just so you know. So that's really it when it comes to bourbon. It's a super simple recipe. One thing people, though, wonder about with whiskey is, when do you use the E, W-H-I-S-K-E-Y, and when is it just K-Y with no E? Well, the easiest way to remember it is if the country that the whiskey comes from has an E in the name, then there's going to be an E in the whiskey. So, because the United States, of course, has an E, bourbon whiskey is with the E. Irish whiskey is with the E, but Japanese, Canadian, Scotch whiskey, no E in the whiskey, no E in the country spelling, right? Okay, so that's it for our Bourbon Basics. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at this amazing cocktail book. So let's take a look at the first introductory page, not the signature page. This is a book from 1930, and it was written by Harry Craddock, who was the barman at the Savoy Hotel in London at the time. Now, 1930, if you're thinking, yeah, that was Prohibition, right. There was Prohibition in the United States and quite a few other countries, so his book came out at kind of a crazy time. But check it out. Look at the art there. It is unbelievable. And he didn't call it an illustration. He said the decorations are by Gilbert Rumbold. And if you get a chance to read some of the text in that, it is absolutely hilarious. He had quite a sense of humor. Really, really famous mixologist. And actually, I was introduced first to the history of the Savoy and Harry Craddock by really the father of master mixology in the U.S., Dale DeGroff, who was behind the bar at the Rainbow Room in New York City in Rockefeller Center for many, many years. And so he was my storyteller and my teacher about how to make cocktails and the history of cocktails. And so we did so much together at Windows on the World long before the cocktail craze of today. And so it's pretty exciting to have been a part of that history. But now let's check it out. I just love this. We're going to go to the signature page because this copy of the book was actually signed by Harry Craddock himself. And it says, "Here's how." So there's an art to cocktail mixology, and you got to do it right, especially if you really, really want to show proper respect to the ingredients, which these days, it's all chefs talk about. Grapes and the quality of the grapes is all vintners talk about. Well, great cocktailians have been talking about the quality and respect for the ingredients since the beginning of cocktail culture. Now, this is so cool, though. The preface, it's Where, Oh Where is a book that gives the earnest student all cocktails, beers, wines. And then he goes on to say, presumption, yes, and we have been warned against it. Writers never get paid. Some of you who are writers probably know that. And he says, anyhow, we're so rich, we don't care if it costs us millions. Nearly all the kind friends in the world are going to read it through. This may prevent it from being dull. Well, by now you can see there ain't no dull with this book. Okay, so I'm going to start us off with, in honor of the great memories of working with Dale at the Rainbow Room and Windows on the World, I'm going to start us off with a Manhattan. And I originally developed what I called the 107 Manhattan for Windows on the World because our restaurant and the greatest bar on earth, no presumption there, right, in the bar name, was on the 107th floor. And so my riff on the Manhattan, first of all, used bourbon whiskey instead of typically rye whiskey as a classic. And I also, instead of vermouth, and you can use sweet vermouth for a sweet Manhattan or dry vermouth for a dry Manhattan, but neither of them are very sweet, I used a fortified wine. And so today I'm going to do that with port. And so we're going to make a Manhattan that I have coined. We're going to go to this lower third now. The Muito Manhattan. And the reason I call it that is because muito is the word in Portuguese, which of course Portugal speaks Portuguese, for very, all right? So this is the very Portugal Manhattan, and it's pronounced muito, even though there's no N there, but it's just part of the pronunciation. So this is my muito Manhattan. The first thing we're going to do is actually chill the glass. And let's go to our cocktail rules page in the Savoy cocktail book, because I didn't make this up. Clearly, the great bar people have been focused on things like ice and a chilled glass for many generations. So in order to do that, I'm just going to put a little bit of ice in my cocktail glass. I'm going to serve this up, obviously, in a cocktail glass. Some people drink a Manhattan on the rocks. To me, you're watering down the spirits. And once you've properly mixed it and it's cold, I don't want to water the spirits down anymore, and I don't want to lose the concentration of the flavor. So we start with that. Now, I do not know where my pint mixing glasses have gone. They've gone MIA, so I'm going to make do with this. So if it looks like I'm putting a lot of alcohol in, that's just because the mixing glass is small. But it's mighty cute, and I like it. So we're going to put a little bit, or a lot of ice in here. And if you've been really sort of hanging out and exploring the cocktail culture, you know that ice has become the latest new obsession. Well, back at Rainbow Room and Windows on the World, Dale was already obsessed with ice. So he had these very special ice machines that almost no other restaurant had. As you've probably seen now, restaurants are making their own, right? And they're carving them and sawing them into these perfect, awesome cubes, which I think is great. I didn't do that today. All right, so I've got a bunch of ice in there, and now I'm going to do equal parts. Actually, no, I'm going to do 2 to 1. So I'm going to do an ounce of my tawny port. This is the Taylor Fladgate. They're one of the flagship port producers, of course. And tawny just means that it's oxidatively aged. This says 10-year. That's a representation of roughly the average age of the wines in the blend. And oxidatively means, yes, it was aged in a barrel. That's why this flavor profile is going to be fantastic with bourbon. They both share that barrel-aged, toasty, rich, caramelized toffee quality in the taste profile. Minus, and we've got super high quality here. A lot of times vermouth, which is the traditional ingredient, is made from sort of bulk wine, not very high quality. Well, this is a world-class port. So we are going to use a world-class bourbon to go with it. This is Bullet Bourbon, and if you are wondering if we like it based on the fact that there's not much left, well, yes we do. And this is one of the classics. 150 years or so ago, they were founded by the Bullet family, and it's been a hugely popular bourbon. So I'm actually going to put just a tad more because I want to fill up my glass because I think it's going to look good that way. And traditionally, you would garnish the Manhattan with a cherry. These days, even the cherry is important. And since I did not have the cool cherries that everybody is using that are not Dayglow red and I don't know how many different dyes in the cherry, we're just going to go garnish free. All right, so basically I'm stirring it to chill it down. I'm not going to shake it. Almost never shake a bourbon drink unless it's like a whiskey sour where you're trying to put air and froth into it along with the citrus juice. Notice that the bar spoon that I use has a curve in it. Basically, every bartender, as soon as they get a bar spoon, the first thing they do is bend it because when you do that, it allows you to get this sort of center vortex that makes it a whole lot easier to stir with just the tips of the fingers rather than an arm motion. All right, so now I've got my glass chilled. I am so excited about this. Dump the ice. And then I've got my strainer that I've been using double duty as an ice scoop. Good to the last drop, like that. And that is my Muito Manhattan, right? Gorgeous. All right, I'll just make sure it's good enough for you guys. Fabulous. That is, honestly, you've got to try it with port. Sorry to the vermouth guys. There's a lot good about vermouth in terms of making cocktails, but you can really dial up your Manhattan if you use a great fortified wine like tawny port. Okay, now it is Derby-less Saturday this time around, but we still can drink the classic Derby cocktail, which is, of course, the mint julep. And we're going to go to the mint julep page. It looks like in the Savoy cocktail book they have a bunch of juleps. They have a whole section. I found the southern mint julep, which I think is the one that really is what they drink at Churchill Downs in Louisville and all around that area, and by all Derby fans worldwide. So it uses, of course, whiskey. In this case, I'm going to clearly have to use Kentucky bourbon. So we'll use the bullet again. And some recipes call for cracked ice. Harry Craddock's recipe here calls for cracked ice. A lot of bartenders swear by crushed. So now this is where we're going to get a little noisy and a little crazy. I'm going to use my Vitamix to crush the ice. And then once you crush it, we're going to rush it because we have to make sure that we use the crushed ice very quickly because it will melt very quickly. But the crushed ice is just going to give that incredible refreshment and frost up the sides of the glass. Traditionally, you would use a pewter cup and you would stir until the metal frosts over because it conducts the cold so well. I don't have one, and you probably don't either. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to need fresh mint, which my kids harvested for me from the yard today, so we're lucky about that. And again, I'm going to use the port. This time, though, it's instead of superfine sugar. So typically, you would put your mint leaves into the glass. I like to use a lot. And then you would add sugar, superfine sugar. I'm going to use port instead of sugar. Number one, because it's not processed. There's still sugar in the wine. It's quite sweet, but it's natural grape sugar. And number two, I don't want it that sweet, right? So I just want to use a little bit. So I'm going to do about 1.5 ounces. Whoops, that's maybe a little extra. And then we're going to muddle it. And this is a classic muddler. Let's go back to our ingredient picture there. We've got kind of a hero shot of our ingredients so you can see up close and personal. And you'll notice I don't have any seltzer water in the picture. I'm not going to use that because of the crushed ice, but some recipes, especially if it's for cracked ice, will float some seltzer on the top. My muddler here, as you can see from the picture, is pretty beat up and marred up. That's the business end especially, which is the flat one. It's rather like a Louisville Slugger, right? Lovingly beat up. So I'm going to muddle, and that means crush up the mint. Basically, we're just releasing all of that mint essence and oil into the liquid so we'll be able to taste it. And so some recipes I've seen, they get it literally down to a paste, but you're not going to make that happen unless you use sugar because you would need the grit to be able to muddle against. And so here, that's fine. We're just going to have a nice high fiber drink, I guess. Okay. All right. So I think I'm smelling it from here. It smells fantastically minty. So I'm going to stop with that. And now I'm going to crush the ice. So I have a microphone on this, so this could get pretty loud and noisy. But what we're going to do is just dump a bunch of ice in the Vitamix container. And I did wash my hands about 30 times already today, probably like you. So I'm going to use my hands for speed. And we're going to fill it pretty full. And then the trick here is we actually add water. And that helps crush it. So we add water and then we drain it. So here's what you do. And the ice should be floating, but it's not. So we're going to just go with it as is. And then, of course, we're going to dump all the water. So here's how it goes. As soon as I find the lid. Oops, there we go. Okay. Oh, now it's floating. Good. Wow. Super cool. I can tell this looks great. Okay, so I'm just going to dump the water through my clean strainer. And now I have me a total winner of a pile of crushed ice. We should be doing shave ice. I should be finding a non-alcoholic syrup to pour over it for the kids. Maybe I'll do that when we're done. And what did I do with my scoop? Let's see. Well, that's crazy. Okay, we'll just grab another one. Grab a spoon. Okay. All right, so now we're going to fill the glass with crushed ice. Wow, this is almost basically like foamy ice. Okay. And you can see it's really, really dense. We'll pack it down because as soon as I start to add the bourbon, it's going to start to melt it. And we may add some more. So, looks good. Maybe a little more. Okay. Now, I'm going to put a good 2 ounces of bourbon. So, and right now I'm just kind of fantasizing about like maybe even pouring some port over that shaved ice and drying that. I don't know. Okay. Whoops. I spilled a little bit, but that should be good. I won't fit anymore in this glass. And now, same thing as before. We're just going to spin it and stir so that everything mixes, but also so that the ice starts to melt. Because there's an old adage, and I think maybe it was Professor Jerry Thomas, a very famous barman, that classic cocktail recipe, 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, and 4 of weak. Well, the strong's the whiskey. We don't really have a sour ingredient in here, but we get a little bit of acidity from the wine. And then we also get the sweetness from the wine, or you would get it from the sugar. And then, of course, the weak is the water. But if it's maybe a screwdriver, it'd be the OJ and the ice, right? So there you go. And now we pack the top with more crushed ice. Whoops. We make it overflow, which means we have to sip it. Ooh, that is really good. And then we garnish with a little mint. So that, as Dale DeGroff would say, you have the flour coming off the top of the glass. And in fact, some bar experts like to spank it like that. You don't want to crush it with your hands because you want it to look good, but if you spank it, you release those fragrant oils. And man, wow, that's a toughie. I have my trusty sidekicks here, my daughter Jessie running the switcher, and my husband running the camera. So my husband will be able to join me in enjoying these cocktails, and my daughter, by the time she's of legal drinking age, is going to be so smart when it comes to cocktails and wine that she's going to make a ton of money in college as a waitress, right, when the restaurants open back up. So that'll be a great day to look forward to. Just for this moment, in honor of Thirst Day, and to make sure I get to taste these cocktails one more time while they're in perfect chilled condition, I'm going to be double-fisted. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you will be back at least on Saturday for the Derby Day Hat Contest and our special Cellar raid. But I know I'll see quite a few of you tomorrow for Friday Flights with our hashtag Sauvignon Blanc Day. Really don't miss that because the pairings are going to be really delicious and a lot of them very, very easy. 1 or 2 of them unbelievably surprising, and you are going to just become your neighborhood's best pairing expert after this episode. So thanks again. Please, please take care of yourself. Stay safe. And we will see you again for another episode of Sip Therapy. Cheers.